Can't believe it.
Hello?
Hey, Jordan, what's up? This is Eric from the Voice of MMA. You're on KnoqOut Radio. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. Jordan, I'm not going to be hostile with you like everybody else did in the videos and stuff like that. We're just going to talk and debate this, all right? Mad or nothing. We're just going to talk like all right?
I wasn't aware that people were hostile with me in general.
No. I'm just talking to you like I'll debate with you, man, because I understand the position you're in as a writer. You're like in charge of Sherdog and et cetera. But about the rankings, man, how did you come up with the rankings like that? The new pound list. Why is the top 10 list says all Zuffa people? Can you explain to me why it's just Zuffa on it?
Well, in general, we have a whole rankings panel that gets together and discusses how, after any series of events, they'll fluctuate. I mean, after, for instance, normally it seems that they're kind of like grouped together. Normally, when we update them, 2 or 3 guys will have fallen on the list, and we just decide based on sort of what happened, how they move. There's we don't really care who a particular fighter belongs to or what promotion they're with. We've had times where there's been considerable representation from outside of Zuffa. For instance, we had one period where I think we had like Eddie Alvarez, Shinya Aoki, and there was someone else that was on the list at the same time that wasn't a Zuffa guy. And we have times like this now where I think 9 or 10 guys are Zuffa guy, and the only guy that isn't is Gilbert Melendez. But, I mean, we were ranking Jake Shields on our pound for pound list before he was even a Zuffa guy. So, I mean, there's no Machiavellian design in that regard. It just happens to be guys that are winning fights consistently in strong weight classes and beating good opposition. We don't really care if someone's with UFC, WEC, Strikeforce, Dream, whatever.
So, question on this one real quick. Why is it that a guy who lost one fight in 10 years, he's probably the best heavyweight of all time from Pride, and now he's in Strikeforce, why is he not on the top 10 list? But Rashad Evans and the Lyoto Machida are there. I don't get that, man. To be honest with you, that's my opinion. I don't get that, Jordan.
If you're referring to Fedor Emelianenko, it's the fact that his resume over the last 3 years isn't good. Part of it's that he's in the heavyweight division. The heavyweight division is pretty moribund. For instance, I mean, I guess this would be the best way to explain it. Obviously, with our rankings, with the pound for pound list, and our divisionals as well, the emphasis is on what have you done in recent memory. Because the question we're trying to get to is who, in this moment in time, like if we take a snapshot of this moment, who are the most accomplished and relevant fighters in this moment? So if you were to ask yourself that, what has Fedor Emelianenko done sort of in the last 3 to 4 years? The most outstanding victories that he has are Tim Sylvia, Andre Arlovsky, and Brett Rogers. It says a lot that none of those fighters are considered top heavyweights at this point in time. And that's the nature of the heavyweight division. Guys don't really sustain in the heavyweight division outside of the very, very upper crust. And that's because there's a lot of elasticity in the division. Like someone like Brett Rogers became a top 10 heavyweight by virtue of beating Andre Arlovsky, a guy with a history of inconsistency. Tim Sylvia remained relevant largely based off beating Andre Arlovsky. Like the division itself isn't that good. If you ask yourself, what does it take to be a top 10 heavyweight? It takes a whole lot less competitively than it does to, say, be a top 10 welterweight. If you think about like fringe top 10 guys in the welterweight division, guys sort of on the lower end of the top 10 or on the cusp of the top 10, your Dan Hardys, your Martin Kampmans, Paulo Thiagos, Ben Askren, these sorts of guys. When you think about what they've actually done in their careers relative to the division, it's actually far more impressive than what top heavyweights have done. The problem is it just takes less to be a top heavyweight. And in a lot of cases, it just takes one decent win because heavyweights aren't as consistent, because in most cases they aren't as well trained, they aren't as good athletes as guys at welterweight or at lightweight. And so what that informs is, it informs sort of hierarchy. It means more, for instance, it means more to be a guy like John Fitch, who maybe you're not that exciting, maybe you're not that pleasing to watch, but every time you go out, you beat someone in a really good weight class who, by virtue of where they're at, it's much harder to be an outstanding welterweight than it is to be an outstanding heavyweight. So as a result of that, it means more to beat, your average top 10 welterweight than it does to beat a top 10 heavyweight. So with that in mind, I would say with Fedor Emelianenko, even when he was the number one heavyweight, it wasn't his resume at that point better than his contemporaries, but not really that great. Tim Sylvia under Arlovsky, Brett Rogers isn't a great recent resume for any fighter. Then he lost to Verdum. Personally, let me also say that I felt Fedor Emelianenko was, I think we had him at 3 or something like that, and I felt that was too high for him even before he lost, because I thought that was kind of an attempt to placate people who simply banged on long and hard about what a great fighter he is. So in the face of his defeat, he lost to a guy that was absolutely obliterated by Junior Seagano not too long ago, further reflected the fact that heavyweight isn't that great of a division. And for a guy like Rashad Evans has beat, quality fighters. He beat Forrest Griffin at a time where he just come off beating Rampage and Shogun, 2 pound-for-pound quality guys at the time that Forrest Griffin had beat him. Beat Thiago Silva, another guy generally seen as a top 10 light heavyweight. Quentin Jackson, a guy who was 4-5 in his last 5 fights in the very good 205-pound division. So I have no problem at all with Rashad Evans having a place on the list and Fedor Emelianenko not having one at this point in time.
All right.
Now, Jordan, let me ask him one more question. Jordan, I want to ask you this question because my cousin used to work for MMA Weekly when it first started with the old owner that passed away. And I want to ask you this question now. Are you trying to get on Zuffa's good side because what happened back in the day when you guys spilled the beans on the first Ultimate Fighter telling you who the winner was on a site and you pissed off Dana? So are you trying to get on the good side of Zuffa by doing this now? Be honest with me right now.
Well, first of all, the beef with Sherdog getting not credentialed by the UFC has nothing to do with the Ultimate Fighter Season 4. That's a little bit of revisionist history that you should probably investigate. Credentials were taken away from Sherdog as well as other MMA sites at the time, long before the top 4 thing happened. Secondly, we've been into UFC events since then. We were re-credentialed, had our credentials pulled back. The politics of our relationship, and I don't even want to say with Zuffa. Lots of people at Sherdog have good working relationships with people at Zuffa, but Dana White has had a problem with some of our coverage in the past, and as a result, we don't get credentialed. But no, we don't. We do our job just fine. We have covered every UFC and every WEC of the Zuffa era, whether or not we've been credentialed for them, and it's not really a concern of ours. And more than that, like I mentioned, we got our credentials back for a moment in last summer, so summer 2009, and it had no our coverage we were doing up to that point. We didn't have any bearing on whether or not we got the credentials back. So it's not something really that concerns us. And more than that, even if we did, even if we made it 10 out of 10 and eliminated Gilbert Melendez and put another Zuffa fighter 10th, I don't know that would that really make Dana White happy. It seems like if really Sherdog was going to attempt to make up with Dana White in some way, there would be far more proactive and beneficial ways to do it than doctoring a pound-for-pound list, which we have no real interest in.
All right. Hey, Jordan, this is Arthur. Quick question. We have a live chat open, and there's some people asking the same question over and over again. What is your definition for pound? Because it's a big debate on the forums, not just the Sherdog forums, but all sorts of MMA forums. People seem to sort of get a little confused what pound for pound actually means. So, in your own words, like, what does it mean to you and your panel of your rankers?
Well, first of all, you need to sort of be cognizant of the fact there are 2 pretty divergent ideas that surround the pound-for-pound debate. First, understand that the idea of pound-for-pound came around sort of in the 40s and 50s when boxing writers were looking for a way to make people care more about Sugar Ray Robinson, who in general is seen as the greatest boxer ever lived, was certainly the greatest boxer of his day. And because he, had such success, people looked for a way to say, even though this guy's not a heavyweight, this is the guy you need to pay attention to. So they came up with this idea that pound for pound, he was the greatest fighter. Now, when people normally talk about pound-for-pound ideas, one thing you'll hear is they sort of associate it with abstract and unquantifiable skill sets. So-and-so is pound-for-pound the best jiu-jitsu guy, or pound-for-pound he hits the hardest. The idea that's being offered in those scenarios is if we could somehow make every human being the same relative, or make everyone the same absolute size, but with their same relative attributes. Since if you are fast for being a bantamweight, if you were heavyweight size and had the same relative speed, you would be incredibly fast for a heavyweight. So the idea that's being offered there is that everybody was the same size and we could all fight in this big magical universe. Who would be the best? But of course, that's, there's no ray gun that can accomplish this and shrink and grow human beings to one size and have them keep their relative attributes. What is done with a pound-for-pound list, like a divisional list, the way they've been done in boxing for nearly a century, the way that they're done when they're done right in MMA, it doesn't seek to answer any question about who would beat who, because that's not really important. After all, we see upsets all the time in MMA. Our ideas about who would beat who are highly speculative at best and aren't particularly important. The goal of fighting, ostensibly, is to beat your best contemporaries. That's what are the prize fighters. Obviously, it's their money, but greatness in prize fighting is considered who'd you beat, how'd you beat them, were they the best guys in your weight class or in your weight range in a period of time. That's how we assess greatness. So likewise, the pound-for-pound list assesses who'd you beat, how'd you beat them, how good is your weight class, do you have accomplishments recently in multiple weight classes, these kind of questions. Those are sort of what we're assessing. We're asking, is George St. Pierre's resume better than Jose Aldo's? Is it better than Anderson Silva's? How does John Fitch's resume, being number 2 in a really good division like welterweight, how does that stack up in comparison to being number 1 in a division that maybe isn't as good, like 135 pounds, where they don't have the depth yet? So those are the questions that we kind of attempt to get through with the pound-for-pound list. The pound-for-pound moniker does kind of, because of the silly debates people get in, it often does kind of obscure what the goal is and what the goal of these lists has always been. For as long as they've been around in the boxing world and as long as they've been around in the MMA world, the ultimate goal is you're kind of asking who right now at this point in time, with respect to the best opponents they beat, who is the most recently accomplished mixed martial artist? Who has the best recent resume? And how does it stack up to their contemporaries?
Now, you mentioned that you guys have basically like a rankings committee. Is there any fans, quote unquote, on it, or is it just are the Sherdog writers? Because one of the most popular pound for pound ranking systems and lists, not just pound for pound but all sorts of weight classes right now, is from lowkick.com, where the fans basically vote on who they think should be pound for pound and heavyweight, light heavyweight, top 10. And their lists, no offense to yours, but they're pretty different than yours.
Our group is just a panel of our editors and our writers, the usual suspects, people that you expect to be there, your Greg Savages and Jeff Sherwoods and the like, as well as some other writers that maybe don't have the Q value, but are still valuable contributors to our site. Tim Leidecker, Tony Lawler, James Meinhardt. I think the list in total now, I think we have about, I don't think 12. 12 seems a little much. I think it's probably closer to 10 people that chime in at this point in time. So yeah, it's nothing too exhaustive. There's no exam necessary. We just take people from the site who are the kind of people that decide our content and decide our editorial direction. There's no licensure or anything of that nature.
Now, earlier you said that the heavyweight division sort of fluctuates, like one guy beats another guy and so on and so forth. Isn't that a testament to the heavyweight division being really stacked, and that's why people like move up and down so much? Is because nowadays there's a lot more competition in the heavyweight division than, let's say, 3-4 years ago, when it was just kind of like Tim Sylvia and Jeff Monson, and then you had Fedor and everybody else over in Pride.
I think we're moving in that direction for sure. The heavyweight division now is absolutely the best it's ever been. The idea that we have at one time, Cain Velasquez and Brock Lesnar and Junior Dos Santos and, tons of prospects as well. It's absolutely the best it's ever been, and I think we might move towards a level of stability. But, no, I mean, is it, I don't know, I mean, you might disagree. Is it fair to say that in terms of depth and talent, that lightweight's probably the best division in the world? Is that a fair statement to make to you guys?
I think the lighter weight classes are way more stacked.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Okay, and then you look at 155 pounds, and guys that have been the best for a while. You have some guys who are kind of erratic in their performances, a guy who bounces in and out, maybe like a Takanori Gomi, but by and large, guys at lightweight who are considered top 10 fighters have been considered top 10 fighters for a while. Gilbert Melendez has been considered one for 5 years. Tatsuri Kawajiri for close to 7 years now. BJ Penn for basically as long as he's been in the division. You've had some up-and-comers who joined the list in the past years, Frank Edgar, Gray Maynard, Evan Dunham recently. But most of the guys who end up on the list stay there unless they're overtaken by a guy who himself is going to stay there. And what you see at heavyweight is a different kind of relationship. You see, look at a guy like